see you anymore.
Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our January month meetup. For those of you who have already joined us in our past monthly talks, welcome back. And for those who are new here, I'd like to welcome all of you to our community. We are called Automation Advocates, and it is a community powered by AskUI. And here is the Discord link, so you all can, so feel free to join the Discord community, stay connected to find out about the future events and to know more about our services. And before we begin, I would like to inform you all that this meeting will be recorded. And so feel free to turn on or off your camera based on your interest. And today's topic is going to be exploratory testing driven by Mind Apps. And we have with us Claudia Badell. Hi, Claudia.
Hi, hello everyone.
Claudia have already given a short introduction about herself already, but I would like to take pleasure and introduce her again. Claudia Badell is an agile enthusiast with a strong background in software testing and more than 15 years of experience. She works as a software testing consultant and coach at Jigsaw Labs, and as a trainer and Spanish translator for holistic testing. She has spoken at various testing conferences, she has already mentioned that, and has also helped write the Agile Testing Condensed book along with Janet Gregory and Lisa Crispin. So now I will let Claudia take over from here, please.
Thanks for the introduction. Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today, I will talk about how mind maps can support an exploratory testing approach. And from my point of view, this approach can be applied in different contexts. So I hope it helps you to enhance your testing strategy. Well, I am from Uruguay, and I will skip this slide about myself as I already have a short introduction about me. So the agenda for today is to have a briefly introduction about what exploratory testing and mind maps are. Then I will share how we can design and use mind maps to support and enhance an exploratory testing approach. Then I will share some lessons learned about applying this approach. And finally, I will share a few tips to start using mind maps in your team to support an exploratory testing strategy if you are interested in using them. Okay. I am assuming that you all are familiar with exploratory testing. Just in case, this is one of the best known definitions about it. It highlights the idea of developing new tests based on what you have learned so far while interacting with the software being tested. This approach has two main concepts, missions and sessions. Missions or charters help focus our effort when exploring the system under test. A session is an interrupted period of time spent testing, lasting 1 to 2 hours, where each session is focused on a charter. This approach is useful to obtain results very quickly, identify bugs in places where may not expect them, focus on functional cycles, learn about the product under test, among others. From my experience, when I'm applying an exploratory testing approach, I think there are two main challenges. Well, actually 3, but today we will talk about 2 of them. One of them is a personal challenge, that is, how do I reuse what I have learned from the different exploratory sessions throughout the different test cycles? And then a second one, from a team level perspective, how do we share as a team what we have learned during the different exploratory sessions? In order to tackle both previous challenges, I have been using mind maps to support an exploratory testing approach as a team approach. So before seeing how we use mind maps to to tackle those both challenges, I will share what a mind map is, just in case you are not familiar with the concept. A mind map is a graphical representation of ideas and concepts. It's a creative and a logical way of note-taking using symbols, colors, shapes, words, lines, and images. Here we have a mind map which describes what a mind map includes. For example, we have colors to emphasize ideas, or we can use symbols to show priority or to show progress. We can also use arrows to express dependencies, and we can also link mind maps to each other if the tool that you are using supports it. In general, mind maps help us organize and visualize ideas, identify dependencies, discuss ideas, enhance creativity, share knowledge, among others. And in the context of exploratory testing, they are very powerful because We are going to see why. So I have been applying this approach as a team testing strategy for more than 10 years in different teams. And in the context of this talk, when I mention team, I refer to a cross-functional team fully dedicated to building a product or software. And also from the testing perspective, testing is performed by most of the team members, not only by the testers. Yes. So let's talk first, how do we design the mind maps? And then we will focus on how we use them. We build a mind map for each feature or module of the system being tested. A mind map includes the test conditions, ideas, variables to cover a feature from the testing perspective. The mind maps help us have a common understanding of what to test, and through the mind maps, we can easily represent the dependencies between the different test variables and features. So now the idea is to see an example, to see how we design them, because I think it's the best way of seeing, it's the best way of learning most of the time is seeing an example. So let's see a very short example. This example is from a product that is in the cloud, and there is a functionality which allows the users to add comments. In order to add a comment, we have this field, the one which is highlighted with a light blue arrow in the screen. You also can add a comment as a signed-in user or not being authenticated. You can also delete a comment posted by yourself, and also you can reply to a comment. This is the functionality that we are going to design a mind map. So this snapshot shows the mind map with the testing consideration from the commenting feature. In our case, the central node is always the name of the feature or module being tested. And each subnode that is directly connected to the central node corresponds to an aspect that we may focus on when testing the feature. There are our missions to cover when exploring. For example, from the commenting perspective, from the commenting feature perspective, we have to test the commenting form, but also maybe the notifications that are sent when adding a comment, or the real-time considerations and other considerations that cover the behavior of that functionality. So each of those directly nodes connected to the main node, in this case the feature commenting, represent one aspect that we may focus when testing. They are like the charters of the exploratory testing approach. So under each subnode, that means for each focus or charter or mission, what we include under that subnode are the context, the test ideas, and variables to cover that aspect of the feature. So what we are going to do now is to focus on the add comment form subnode. Here we can see different testing variables, and ideas that we may consider when testing the add comment form. And those ideas are taken as an input when exploring the feature. As a team, we define some conventions while designing the mind maps. For example, the from label with the blue background implies that under this node, you will find information, for example, from where the feature being tested can be triggered. This type of label is included in all our mind maps, so it's easy for us to identify this type of information through the different mind maps. That means if I open another feature and I see this label, I know that under or below under it, I will find from where the feature or the functionality is being triggered in the system. And that is because we need to know from where all the places that we may need to test it. We also have conventions in how we use symbols through the different mind maps. For example, if the feature behaviors depends on what the user is signed in, you will find two types of symbols. You will find a green person symbol to represent that the user is signed in, and a red one to represent that the user is not authenticated. And under each of them, you will find considerations from the testing perspective for each context. So the idea again is having this symbol convention to help us identify very easily in the mind map when the features behaviors depends on the users being signed in or not. If we focus on, for example, on testing the content of what we can type in the form, we include different test ideas that we may consider when testing it. For example, the length of the comment, the amount of enters, and so on. And the main goal of this is to have a very easy way to identify what to test when I have to test the feature commenting, in this case, the add comment form. So when here we have again the commenting mind map collapsed. Now let's focus on this orange node. What happens in this system is when a user adds a comment, a notification email is sent to all users involved in the thread of the conversation. But what happens in this system, as email notifications are triggered from different features in the system, instead of having the test considerations to cover email notification testing in each mind map, what we do is to have a centralized mind map to centralize all the considerations when testing an email notification in the system. So all features that send an email notification will have this orange node with a link to the feature mind map that includes the testing consideration to test it. In this way, it's very easy to extend new ideas to cover the email notifications. If, for example, when performing regression testing, we identify new test ideas or, for example, a new context to consider, instead of going to update each node, each mind map which has notification, what we do is to update only one, the centralized one, because all the other features that have the email notification will have the reference to the centralized mind map for that behavior of the notifications. So it's very easy. It helps to maintain the mind maps when we have a system that in time has a long life cycle somehow. And also the arrow from the add comment form to the node to the email notification node implies that this feature, the add comment, in this case, triggers email notifications, and we need to test them when adding the new comment. So with the arrow, we express that dependency from one behavior to another one. Here we can see the full mind map for the example that we have just seen. I am not expecting that you can see its detail. I just want to show you its size and structure. The highlighted area corresponds to the test ideas and variables that we may consider when testing the comment form. Other colors that you can see here in the mind map have the semantic, but we are not going to see them because of time restrictions. Until now, we talk about how we design the mind maps. So now let's briefly talk about how we can use them when applying an exploratory testing strategy. The mind maps are used as a reference for exploratory testing sessions. This means that we use the mind maps as an input when testing a feature. The mind maps guide us in thinking what to cover from a testing perspective. Remember that each mind maps include the test ideas and variables that we may consider when testing a certain feature. Through the different testing cycles, we reuse the mind map, so we don't have to rethink test ideas or conditions and variables every time from scratch. We reuse that knowledge in the team when performing regression testing, and also when we are extending the behavior of a functionality in our system. That means that we extend or update our feature mind maps to reflect the changes in the product. Or for example, we use them also when a team member tests a feature and identifies new test ideas or variables not included in the feature mind map. That means that those mind maps are alive artifacts, because we reuse that knowledge through the different test cycles, and also to reflect the changes or the extensions that we develop in the feature. So we also extend the mind map to cover those changes. Or for example, if someone is performing a regression testing and identify a new test idea that was not thought from the beginning, what we do is to extend the mind map to include it. So the next time that we have a new regression testing from that feature, we have that knowledge explicitly shared in the mind map. So that's more or less how we use it. Also, what we do when we are applying this approach, and something that is really important, is to have a centralized repository where the team stores the mind maps. It's important, from my experience, to define file name conventions and a folder hierarchy structure. So when someone adds a new mind map in our repository, everyone in the team knows where to look for. So it's really important to think how we are going to store them, to have them available from all team members. So now I will share some lessons that I learned during this journey. So in the context of an exploratory testing approach, the mind maps help, from my point of view, in a lot of enhance the strategy in a lot of items. But one of them that, from my experience, is really important is that the mind maps help iterate over existing test ideas, because more than one person using the mind maps implies that more people or more than one person is thinking about the problem. So we improve our mind maps because we have different mindsets, as each team member has a different expertise or knowledge about the system or the product. So that is really important, because as we iterate with the mind map for the regression perspective, we have more than set of eyes seeing the ideas and variables to cover from the testing perspective. They also help us have a common understanding of the feature in the team. And they also help us share knowledge. For example, team members can improve their knowledge of the feature beyond their specific activities. For example, I use a lot of these mind maps to perform cross-testing between the developers. For example, if a developer is involved in implementing the feature, that from the test strategy, I will assign them another mind map from another feature, so that person, that developer, will learn from other features in the system that may in the future impact the one that he or she is developing. So we can have a shared understanding about what the system does, not only from what you are specifically doing in your daily basis. Also, we can share knowledge using mind maps, not only from that perspective, also, for example, we have used them a lot, for example, when a new team member joins the team, or a team member has to test a feature they were not involved in during the development. So this person who is joining the team, for example, will have a baseline for what to cover and consider from the testing perspective. And also to, not only from the testing perspective, also to understand the behavior of the functionality with a coverage that not only is focused on the feature, but also in how it impacts other features in the system. Something that, from my experience, is also very important is to only track what is relevant for the team. For example, in the different teams that I have been part of, for example, we don't track the data set or the different paths that we explored during the test execution at the mind map, because it was not relevant information in our context. Because what is or was relevant in our context through the different teams is to use the mind map as an input with the test condition as ideas and variables to cover the feature from the testing perspective. But in our context, at least in the teams that I work, it's not important to have the evidence of what were the data set or the different paths that we cover. What it's important in our context is to share the knowledge of what to cover when testing certain feature. So what we track is the test ideas, the variables to share through the different cycles in the team, but what we don't track, for example, which was the data set to test, for example, the length of the comment. Some team members, what they do is to make a copy of this meta mind map. So we have a clean mind map for the feature to be reused in the team, and when exploring, the person who copied it locally can track the coverage in the copied mind map, but we have a clean one to share in the team. Yes? You can ask me any question if you have them, for sure. So now let's talk about some tips to start using mind maps in your team if you are interested in using them. So I strongly recommend doing a brainstorming session before designing a mind map to cover a functionality or module with the different team members involved developing and testing it. Mainly, this is in order to identify the testing variables and idea, and also to discuss in a high level perspective how to organize those ideas in the mind map, because I think this will help different members to extend and understand easily the mind map in the future. So we have like a high level design mind map structure conversation in the team before doing the first time the mind map. Other recommendation from my experience is to elaborate mind maps together with developers involved in the functionality or module, because the developers can help identifying testing variables and ideas from inside the code, which are more difficult to identify from a black box strategy. Other recommendation is to execute cross-testing by including the team members who designed the mind maps and other team members, because having a second set of eyes can help us identify new test ideas and variables that were not identified when they designed the mind map at first time. And something that from my experience is also important, not only from this strategy, I think this applies for all testing strategies that you apply as a team approach. I think it's important to define someone in the team to be the guardian of the strategy, in the sense to keep it alive, adapt it, and adjust it when it's necessary. So just to wrap up and then have some conversations, I do like this quote that all models are wrong, but some of them are useful. So if you haven't tried mind maps yet, I invite you to start using them. They are really powerful. Here there are some useful links to read about exploratory testing and mind map if you are interested. I will share the slides to the organization. So if you want the slides, you can have it, and also have those reference that I think they are really good from my perspective. So I think we have time now. I deliver time to have open question if you like. Thanks for your time and the organization for having me. I don't know if you have any questions or comments about it. Let me see you, because I am not seeing you.
Great. I guess now we are open. We are actually opening the floor for any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat box to ask your questions.
So thank you very much. My question was kind of how much detail do you go into? So I think maybe you showed us some great examples, and that was very cool. Like, where do you stop? Like, is there any cautionary tales on how much detail not to go into to keep it useful?
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I think this is a great question, because one of the main challenges that I think a team face when you have a long-term life cycle with a product or a system, one of the main challenges is how you maintain and extend any artifact. So that applies also for the mind maps. So what we do, the level of detail that we include in the mind maps are the different, for example, if you know, for example, we don't include data set. We include, for example, the boundaries, the equivalent partitions. What we may change the behavior, but in a very summary level. We don't have phrases, because no one read. So we have these short test ideas very briefly. So what we do is to have this brainstorming session at the beginning for example, imagine that we are going to include for the first time a feature in the system. So the first step in the team is to have a brainstorming about how we are going to cover from the testing perspective that feature. And there, after having a shared understanding of what the behavior is expected and what we are going to cover from that perspective, we have the conversation. Okay, from the testing perspective, we have to consider this, and this, and we documented in the mind map in a very high level detail. For example, the test variables in the sense of heuristics, or for example, if we have real time. For example, what we do is what consideration it's important to have in real time that is a variable here. For example, real time concurrency for more than user, which are the timeout. So very briefly, what are the different equivalent partitions in somehow we can say that change the behavior, but it's not a step-by-step of how you reach that place in the system. It's very different from a test case, because in the test case, you have a step 1, step 2, step 3. Here, we are not including that piece of information. What we include is, okay, if you are there, you have to focus on that. But how you reach to that state of the system is not included there, because is part of the behavior of the system. So we don't document step by step how to reach that condition. What we include is, okay, in this condition or in this context or with this precondition, consider the following. But if you need a piece of information and how to reach that place, you will talk with someone in the team to learn that behavior of the system and how to reach. I don't know if I explain, Ben, if I reply your question.
Yeah, that was very useful. Thank you very much. I think a few people have got their hands up. I don't know if anyone sees the queue.
Okay.
Yeah. Paul, do you want to unmute yourself? Or Nick, do you want to unmute yourself and share?
Hello. So in your context where you are, do you have test cases apart from the mind maps that you have for the system? So do you do formal test cases?
No, we don't have in the teams that I have worked and the ones that I am working now, we don't have designed test cases like steps, expected behavior, and current behavior. What we do is like a high-level detail with the test variables and ideas and preconditions in the mind maps. What if we need to have this piece of information, what we do is we automate it directly. We don't, the only scenarios that we have, like step 1, step 2, step 3, like a sequence of steps, is the ones that are automated. And the main reason in our context, because always everything depends on the context in your team, the company, the system, the criteria, the risk. All time you apply a testing strategy is very important, which are the context, the risk, the system, the team, the expertise. So in our context, what we focus on the manual effort perspective is an exploratory testing approach. And we focus on brainstorming and sharing this baseline of testing for each module. And we track that knowledge. It's the only one that we track. If we need, for example, a complex scenario that is important for us, what we do is we directly automate it, and we keep the exploratory testing approach to complement the automated one.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
Nick, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much for the talk. I really enjoyed it. I'm not familiar with testing. Some of the terminology that's coming up is a little bit outside my domain. But I was wondering if this approach would be helpful for even before development starts.
For sure. Yes. Thanks, Nick. I think that's a great feedback, because as you highlighted, what we are doing behind scene or as a consequence of applying this approach is to share in a common understanding in the team of what to expect from the behavior. So what we do sometimes when we are starting a new feature, when we are gathering the information to understand it before starting developing, we start designing the mind map. This brainstorming that I mentioned a few minutes ago, we don't do it after the feature is developed. We have this brainstorming before the feature or the new behavior is being developed, because we want to identify from the beginning the different scenarios or conditions that may change the expected behavior, so we have a common understanding of what to expect before starting. So these mind maps, you can use it as an input for an exploratory testing approach, but you can also use it as a training material for new team members, not only from the testing, not also for the behavior perspective. And also, as you mentioned and highlighted, you can use them as an input when starting a new story. For example, if you are in an agile context, to start gathering the ideas and the behavior that is expected for that feature. So yes, you can use it for sure as a common understanding in the team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We also have a few questions on the chat box. Johannes asked if you have many mind maps, many mind maps, how do you maintain them efficiently? Do you do this with software, or do you have have to be extra diligent?
What we do, for example, I have like in one of the teams that I work the most time, I work like 8 years. So it's a lot of time for a software because it's a very big system that is in the market for almost more than 10 years now. But what we had more in average, as far as I remember, more than 80 mind maps. So because we have like 80 features. So what we do, or what we did in that team at that time, was first of all have a repository, a shared repository. For example, it could be Dropbox, it could be in the cloud. That depends on how you store your artifacts in your team. So what we do is to have a hierarchy of folders that organize the system. So for example, we had in that moment we had a folder all related to the security mind maps. Other ones from the behavior functionality perspective, and then organize it, for example, by platform, in the cloud, mobile, desktop. So the things that were explicitly different from the platform, you have to go there. So as I mentioned very briefly in one slide in the talk, it's very important when you are starting to apply this is to define in the team a file name nomenclature in how to name those mind maps, and then also how you are going to store them. For example, if you imagine that you have a system with 5 modules, that conceptually you can split it in that. So you will have a folder, for example, for each of them, and inside it you will have more. So where to split it and where to store it is something that, as any other artifact, through time need maintenance. So what we do is, for example, at the beginning we define some hierarchy of folders, and then if the product is extended, what we do is through the time that the system is extended, we also analyze if we need to split folders or if we need to split mind maps. So it's something that is part of your testing strategy, and you have to maintain it as any other artifact, as automation, as any spreadsheet that you have in time. So we do it manually. We don't use a tool to split the mind maps. What we do is, for example, if a feature we identify that is considering more than one feature, for example, we split it or we move the structure. But it's an effort that is doing manually, and that's one of the reasons that we have a guardian of the strategy, because we need to have this file name convention. And the reason, in order to everyone continue understanding where the mind maps and the content of each of them is, we have this cross testing strategy using the mind maps in regression testing.
Great, thanks. I think you've already answered this, but Katya asked, what do you suggest to use design the mind maps? Kaz replies with Miro. She uses Miro, but what do you use? I think you've answered, but I would still want to know.
Yeah, in our context, we use Xmind. We use the Xmind has a free version. We use the desktop one, but I think if you are going to start using mind maps or any other tool, what my suggestion is to evaluate 1 or 2 or 3 and see what are the requirement that you need, and then you evaluate those 3 or 4 tools and keep one. We use Xmind, but there are many of them, and I think it's important, as any tool a team incorporates, is to evaluate a set of them and evaluate what is the best one for their context, because depending on your context, there are different features that the tool may or not have that could be important or not to you.
Great. Thanks for answering that. We also have very great feedback on the chat box, of course. But do we have any more questions? Feel free to unmute yourself.
I am reading the chat just in case.
Any few last questions or any feedback that you might have? Feel free to ask away.
So, thank you very much again for the talk. That was very interesting. I have one last leading question. In addition to your kind of page of resources from elsewhere, is there anywhere we can learn more from your work on exploratory testing and mind maps? Maybe if you have a blog you want to direct us to, or anywhere else we can learn from the experience you shared. Thank you very much. That was useful.
Yeah, I have a blog. I can share it. I not many posts in English, but I am trying to start writing in English. I do like a lot of the topic of heuristics of testing, because I think the third challenge that, from my experience, you have when applying an exploratory testing approach is not only how you share the knowledge in the team, it's also how you think the test ideas, because how you know that the coverage of the ideas that you have are enough to ask if the system or the feature is mature or not. So I think the third challenge when you are applying an exploratory testing approach is how you identify those precondition, context, ideas. And I think one input that strengthens an exploratory testing approach is known heuristic testing heuristics. So there are a lot of heuristic of testing that enhance your strategy. So now I have started to write about that, because I think the challenge that you face when you mature how you share the knowledge in the team is how you identify what to test. So, and I think that is the third challenge that I mentioned today. But yes, I can share my blog here in the chat. There are a few, sorry that there are a few posts in English, most of them are in Spanish. And yes, I have been asked about start writing an ebook about exploratory testing and this approach, and I think it's one of the things that I will do in the short term. So you can ping me maybe in a few months and see what happens. But yeah, thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, heuristics are also super cool. So yes, that sounds great. Thank you again.
Thank you for your time.
Great. Any more questions before we wrap up? Amazing, amazing. So thanks, Claudia, for the amazing talk, and it was a pleasure having you learning about so many things related to exploratory testing and how to actually do it with the mind maps. So thank you everyone for joining, and as you already might be aware that we have our next meetup coming next Thursday. We will have a more collaborative approach there. We'll talk more about how we can, being in the community, what is the benefit, and it's mostly about having a one-on-one conversation with each other. So feel free to register yourself, and there's also our Discord server. We recorded this meeting, and we will be uploading it on our YouTube channel. I will share the recording under adding the comment under our meetup link of today's event. And let us know if you have any question. We'll also share the presentation Claudia shared today, and feel free to reach out to us in case you have any question. And also to Claudia, I'm sure she'll not have any problem with that.
No, not at all.
Great. Well, then that's it. Thank you everyone for joining. Hope you have a wonderful day.